Welcome into another week here of Bourbon South. We're on the Oxford Square. Myself, Steve Thomason, and this week Wes Taylor joining us. And as we always do, we got a lot of bottles on the table and got a little variation of bottles this week. We're going to do some dusty bottles, a little bit of old stuff, and then got some wine on the table because Wes is a wine rep. He's taking sommelier classes and we'll cover a lot of ground today, so appreciate it. You've already poured a few drinks here. Appreciate the time with you. What are we sipping? What do we have today?
Before we started off with Drouhin Chablis. It's a Chardonnay from France. It's not yet in the state. I haven't started selling it yet, but it will be around by the time this podcast comes out, hopefully. The next thing we've got some other wines as well that we might hit up, but as far as bourbon goes, we have some Weller that I picked up on my way to Fayetteville. I believe the year Ole Miss got pummeled in the rain by Arkansas. Then we have our old Charter 101 I picked up in Chula, Mississippi, from an old liquor store that's just a standalone brick building, really old, probably closed now. And then we have an Eagle Rare 10-year bourbon that is from around 2006 that I picked up at another kind of old store on a Mississippi Delta highway, So that's what we have going on today. As well, I brought some port too, and then some vermouth. I brought some vermouth in case we want to make a mixed drink.
We got to walk out of here at some point tonight, so just kind of laying it up. But you mentioned these bottles going through the Delta and different things. Is that one of the deals where are you one of those guys? If you see a place, you're just stopping, going in, seeing what's up, especially the ones that probably are not quite as picked over as some big ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been doing this since I was in college. I'm 30 years old, so I've been doing this for quite a while. And one of my favorite things to do is to take a weekend and find a place in Mississippi that I've never been and go there and look for liquor stores. I picked Yazoo one day, and on the way to Yazoo, I took an alternate route, and that's how I found Chula. And I can say, this honey hole, because at one time it was a honey hole, and I found some J.W. Dant there, some 1990s Old Taylor, and a few other, some Dant charcoal perfected. So I used that spot, as my little honey hole for a while, but now it's picked dry. But you can find places like that still in Mississippi and then in Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia that these kind of standalone, maybe even in a gas station liquor store that they just don't know what they have. It's a mom and pop shop, and I'll see a bottle sitting on the floor and say, hey, let me look at that. Or, do you have any older bourbon that you want to get rid of?
What attracted you to this search? What made this appealing and interesting to spend this much, time and effort into?
I noticed that some of the whiskeys that we were getting the past few years, for the money, weren't all that they were supposed to be. Now we're getting really good, but this was 7-8 years ago. So I kind of gravitated towards that. I remember I had a 1991 Blanton's, and I had this about 2012, and it was so amazing. And I thought, well, I bet there's some old Dusties out there. And then a lot of your real bourbon guys, like 1990s old Granddad, and Ancient Age, and some of those stuff that were made by even some old Fitzgeralds and stuff that's made by Stitzel Weller. So, on the hunt for some of those very well-made bourbons that no one appreciated, especially in the times of the 80s and 90s where only a few people were making high-quality bourbon and no one was buying them. Everyone was drinking vodka or gin or clear liquor, for a while up until, fairly recently. So that, knowing that, it made me say, hey, Mississippi, fairly, fairly good rural town that in Mississippi that has, all these bourbons that they can't sell because no one knows about them. So that's kind of how I started going on little dusty hunts. That and the fact that now I do own my own wine brokerage and importer, what have you in Mississippi. I get to go to different liquor stores and actually, sell my wine. But before then, I was just driving around aimlessly looking for old stores to look at, and 90% of the time I don't find anything, but here I am. We're sitting here with some older bottles that I did find.
1 out of 10 is a win if you hit 1 out of 10. I think it's interesting. Wes was talking about the 1990s Old Taylor 6-year. He brought that to Bourbon Club one time and liked it. Told me the story. And I thought, that's pretty cool. Well, next month I'm duck hunting over in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and thinking, you know what? I'm going to pull Wes this little thing. There were some old stores around some gas stations, and went in and found an Old Taylor 6 and a half pint, a fifth, and it was back to the 1990s. So that kind of got me on the hunt a little bit. I don't have time to stop in stores like Wes talks about, but it is a fun thing. It's just a cool thing to do. And Mississippi's rural. You can take off and walk into some stores and find some interesting things.
There's over 1,000 liquor licenses as far as package stores in Mississippi. So, a lot of these are mom and pop shops that don't get sometimes 2-3 cases of stuff, a month. So most of the stuff they have is older stuff, and the state just actually put in a law that you have to order 10 cases or more for them to deliver to you. So that's going to hurt a little mom and pop shops that survive on maybe 5 or 6 cases that they've been ordering a month. So the Dusties might not last for too much longer as these shops go down, but they always auction off their liquor when these shops do close.
I want to get into them in a second. We'll do that, but for the people that do want to just try this out, are there specific names, ages? Like if somebody wants to go and go, hey, I'm going to look for this, and they do see some old stuff, do you just get it because of the age, or is there some kind of other requirements you're sort of looking for?
Yeah, there's definitely some requirements you're looking for. A lot of people like Wild Turkey. Wild Turkey from the 90s is killer. Of course, if you can find old Blantons. I had last year I had an 82 Bookers from Mississippi, still had the Mississippi seal on it, and it was amazing. Like it was unbelievable. I had it with one of my buddies and 2 crazy Willets at the time, but yeah, I would say Old Crow is another one, which is hard now because some of these brands have reemerged, right? So you can't really tell how old it is just by looking at the bottle. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And then some of the, there's Old Taylor again.
It's back out again.
It's back out again. Old Crow is another one. J.W. Dant. Dant charcoal. I would say any Weller. There's all sorts of Yellowstone from Missouri back in the day. I have some old bottles of that. But finding an old Jim Beam might not be not to say Jim Beam makes what they make, but or finding an old Maker's Mark. There's certain brands out there that are better with age. Matter of fact, I believe y'all did a podcast with one of my friends, Mac, and for my birthday, he brought me a 1956 J.W. Dant bottled in bond, and today it is still a top 3 best bourbon I've had. I had it in the Grove, and it was incredible. So I would say anytime you can find an old W. Dant,
worth grabbing.
And keep in mind, you're not always looking for fifths. A lot of times you're going to find these older ones in the pint bottles. Mm-hmm. And Dusty's right. I will look at the bottom shelf, and sometimes you will see stuff pushed way back, and it's covered in dust because it's been sitting there for 10, 15 years. And like Wes said, it's always ask, hey, you got any stuff in the back? And they automatically think you're asking, do you have any of the hard-to-get pappies and all that stuff? But just like, hey, do you have any old bottles? Because sometimes I've run into, well, yeah, when I bought the store, there's a bunch of old stuff here, and it's just stored in the back. You want to take a look at it. Just, it goes back to what we've discussed before. It's just talking to folks, visiting, and sometimes you get a little lucky there.
And not all old bottles are good. I have duds every now and then, right? So you get an old bottle and it's been oxidized or, matterized when it gets into the heat and cooks. And it can be very, very off-putting, and you can find yourself spitting really quickly. I ran into that when I bought, Old Eagle Rare. They used to have decanters in the shape of eagles. And I bought one that had some old juice in it, and I was so excited. I was unbelievably excited to get this, and it was bad. It was awful. I couldn't even fool myself into thinking that it was good.
But you wanted it to be good.
I wanted it to be good so badly. I thought, I've hit the jackpot here, and I ended up I cried. But I still kept the decanter, and I have it in my bourbon closet, in my bourbon room.
Let's get into the Weller. The first one we're doing here, it's coming from a smaller bottle, and there's nothing on it at all. It is completely unmarked at the moment as we're looking at it, I can tell. So what do we know about it? Well,
you can still see some of the outlines of the Weller Special Reserve there. It doesn't have a laser coat or anything like that. So, I can... Not that I can tell. So, I put this being, early 2000s, maybe 90s. But I haven't done the research on this bottle enough. But, every bottle, they have stamps. In some bottles, this one says, 84, but it's not.
It's not 84.
It's not 84. But you can go online, and I've actually researched this with a lot of bottles I've had, and you can find the glass company and the glass maker, and then they'll have certain years that they made certain types of glass, and they'll stamp those that way. I think I had one old Weller that I was able to date back within 5 years, right? Because they used a certain type of bottle in 1 year, and they transitioned to a different glass maker, and so forth and so on with just the bottles. So if you put in a little bit of time and research, and it does take a while. Normally there's not on this one, but there's a code on the bottle that kind of tells you exactly what it is.
That Eagle Rare will have it.
Yeah, the Eagle Rare has a date. This has a date and it's stamped. But you can also look at this code right here and look that up, and it'll tell you, within what distillery it's made from, right? So in the case of like Old Taylor, at one point was made at one distillery, and then it's transitioned to another. Someone bought it. Someone did this. Someone bought juice from this place. Someone bought juice from another place. But by law, it has to say where the distillery is, where the juice came from, and it might be distilled here and bottled here. That's happened before.
I think I remember you were telling me that about the Old Taylor, because one from the 90s and early 2000s, Jim Beam had it for a while. I can't remember where it was coming from before then, but I think that was supposed to be the better years to look for.
Yeah, the old Taylor distillery. I guess it's called Castle and Key. I think now they have they're making new bourbon there. I don't know if any of those have been released yet. They're still kind of aging.
I don't think they have.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Anyway, this is
we'll try the Weller now.
Weller.
I'm typically not a special reserve guy, but maybe it's the old dusty bottle getting me or whatever. But I kind of like it a little better than I do.
That's fantastic.
Typically now, it tastes pretty good.
Get a little more there. You don't have to drink it all. Just a good pour gets you a good sip. If a thin glass, will pick up all kinds of things from the bottom of the glass.
So has the wine, Wes, taking the sommelier classes, has that really helped your palate? I know I've always thought in bourbon in Oxford, you're one of the guys to me that always could talk about bourbons and tasting notes and aromas and all that. Has the sommelier classes and the experience, is that helping you bourbon-wise as well?
Absolutely. Tasting in general, whether it's, I love cigars, whether it's food or cigars or wine or beer or whiskeys, knowing how to taste, knowing flavor profiles and how flavor profiles develop, in the barrel and then, outside the barrel, right? So the Chablis that we just had, no new oak is on that, right? So there's no new oak. You're not going to get, vanilla or nutmeg or any spices. It's pretty much what it is minerals and lemon, and like limestone, stuff like that. In bourbon, everything's done in charred new oak. So, you're going to get those vanilla notes. You're going to get those. In American oak, we get some dill too. You're going to get maybe some dill somewhere, some bourbons. You're going to get maybe a little bit of coconut. Maybe you're going to get some baking spices, your allspices, your cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, those kind of things. Well, you get those in wine too. You get those in wine and bourbon. So just knowing how to taste and what to look for is a real asset. And I've done deductive tasting courses with master sommeliers that have critiqued my terrible palate and to kind of put me on the right road, knowing what I'm doing wrong, where I'm going, what I'm thinking is one thing is another, how to taste alcohol, how to just smell the aromas of something without burning your palate out. Because if you stick your nose in the glass, you're gonna burn your palate out. You're not gonna be able to smell anything. So kind of one of my favorite things to do is I say sniff like Scooby-Doo or a hound dog. You take short little sniffs. So you're not really burning your palate, so you don't get overwhelmed. And then after a good sniff, I like to smell something neutral. So I'm in my own skin all the time, so I smell my arm or my hand. I try not to smell my hands too much because if I just went to the bathroom, I have soap, so I like to smell my arm or the little crease in my elbow to kind of get my palate back to neutral. So little things like that, help you kind of discern what the bourbon is. Maybe not. I'm not good at calling, like makers of bourbon. But in wine, you can pretty much nail it down to a place, right? So that's very, very helpful to know. But you use some of the same kind of deductive tasting points there. Anybody can do it. I don't know the science behind this, but I think, when my wife is pregnant, she could smell everything. And she knew she could take my cigar and go, it's got some cinnamon in it. It's got a little mintiness to it, some hay, and then a hint of chocolate. I'm like, baby, you've never smoked a cigar and you're already telling me this? How do you know that? Well, all a smell is memory, right? So when you smell something, it's remembering what you have previously smelled. So if you smell roses a lot, you can find rose in different wines. If you're, used to cooking with baking spices and stuff, you can pick out like star anise and some other spices, cardamom, in your bourbons. You can pick those out if you can just smell them and remember what you're smelling. So pay attention, basically, to whatever you're doing, whether you're eating, you're shopping, groceries. They say stop and smell the roses. Well, stop and kind of smell and try to heighten your senses. Be aware of your surroundings, basically.
Yes, I was going to ask you, because you're talking about the technical side of it. I mean, can it completely be learned up to a certain extent? I mean, how much is just, genetic and somebody's built for some, I get on master sommeliers or things along those lines. Yeah. I mean, how much of this is technical and can be learned versus just is what it is?
So I think as far as wines go, you can learn anything structurally. So you don't have to know aromas and flavors and whatnot. You can taste in wine the alcohol content. You can tell, anybody can tell. The acidity, basically, how much it makes your mouth water, and you can tell the tannin. So how bitter it is, right? And some people are more, there's super tasters out there, right? So some people are, super tasters, and they taste something real tannic and it kills them. They can't drink it. That's what new oak is for. You slap a new oak on a bottle or on some wine, and you dial it down and smooth it out a little bit for there's super tasters out there. But I think anybody really can do this if they're aware and pay attention. They have someone teaching them the proper way to do it. I think my wife is a better taster and smeller than me, but I can describe a wine a lot better than she can because she doesn't know how to. But she knows she's smelling something. She just can't describe what she's smelling. It's the same thing with other people. A master sculptor didn't just start sculpting. Michelangelo had a mentor. Leonardo da Vinci, he had a mentor. So they teach you a certain way. So your teacher takes you so far, and then your skills and your talent take you the rest of the way, or into, of course, Leonardo da Vinci, one of the greatest artists ever lived. But he didn't learn just by himself. He worked in Verrocchio's shop for years, kind of learning the basics. Anyone can learn the basics of tasting.
I have an observation. The Chablis tastes totally different now after sipping on the Weller Reserve.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the alcohol's killing it too.
Right.
I think
it mellowed it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of what it seems like.
So what's a good palate cleanser? I think that's a proper term, isn't it, Wes?
Yeah.
When you're tasting to move from one thing to another, do you take a sip of water? What are the best things to do?
Crackers. I like crackers. It'll clean your palate. When I'm drinking, I don't know if I should say this, but when I'm really drinking, I have a Coors Light in between. So I hit a Coors Light and kind of knocked my palate out back out. But on some of these long tastings, I was in San Francisco last March, and hundreds of wines to taste. And the best wines are usually the Burgundies, and they're in the back. In my opinion, the Burgundies are the best. And they're in the back, and so you're tasting all this wine, and your palate does get fatigued. And I like to go back to the champagne table and drink some champagne, right? Because the effervescence and the acidity cleans the palate really well and kind of refreshes the palate, or maybe Riesling. It refreshes your palate. It doesn't fatigue it. If you're drinking these big, fruit bombs, 16% alcohols, they're going to kill your palate all day. So you need a little something light, something refreshing. A little effervescence in there to really some bubbles to rinse your palate. So champagne is a good kind go between. But if you're sitting there and you're tasting bourbon, there's nothing like waters and some just saltine crackers to kind of get you back where you need to go. But half of the fun in tasting things is to pair them, right? I like bourbon and steak or whiskey and meat. Those are two good combo. A good old oaky bourbon with a char grilled ribeye is incredible. And especially if it's a high corn, is just a little bit sweeter too. So a lot of that cut some of the bitterness out of the char that you're getting on your steak. So that's one of my favorite things to do. On the weekends is bourbon, but I drink mostly wine and then probably a glass of bourbon or two when I get home from my day. So I go in, grab what's in one of my decanters, and I fill the decanter up. Once, twice a month. Pour a glass, kind of relax after my day, and just enjoy some whiskey.
Let's kind of move on to the Eagle Rare. I think it's the second one we're doing here. I think you said this was 2006, 2007, somewhere in there.
Absolutely. I love Eagle Rare. It's one of my favorite bottle of bourbon ever was the Eagle Rare 17, and it kind of it's one of the whiskeys that got me just full blown into the bourbon game, or whatever you want to call it. So this is a 10-year. This is the old school label. The 10 on the front, single barrel, made at Buffalo Trace, just the right amount of sweetness.
It's good.
That's good.
That's delicious. I love Eagle Rare has always been my $30 go-to bottle. Consistently, it is just consistently really, really good bourbon. And the $30 price point it's really, really good.
You mentioned having to taste test hundreds of wines and all those things. How do you mentally stay locked into that? Because at some point, I would think you just kind of get bored, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Get hammered.
Well, you're always spitting there, Steve. You're always spitting. But you can get kind of fatigued if you're tasting a lot like that. I've been at a tasting where afterwards, all I wanted was a beer. After these things, all the winemakers and everybody goes out to dinner. And, the last one I went to, me and actually the guy who makes one of these wines that we have here, we went to dinner and we had bourbon. They were from France, from Burgundy. And one of them was from the Loire Valley, Jean Sebastien and Syrah Aldouin. And, we...
I love how Southern gentlemen.
Yeah, Southern gentlemen.
French names just roll right off this tongue.
Jean Sebastien and Syrah Aldouin. And anyway, so we went to this super nice seafood restaurant in San Francisco. And the first thing I did was buy everybody a glass of E.H. Taylor, single barrel. I was like, all right, welcome to America. Okay.
I like it.
We're going to have some bourbon. We'll have wine at dinner. Don't worry. But we're going to drink bourbon first. We've been drinking wine all day from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We're going to have a few beers, or because, you get time to, take a shower or whatever. Take a shower, come back, meet at a bar, drink a couple beers. Of course, there's wine there too, because all the winemakers are there. And then you go straight to dinner. And, honestly, after that much wine, it's just like, come on, I need something else. And so, ordered bourbon for everybody. And then, of course, get back into the wine once you have a couple bourbons.
Chasey threw you a softball a while ago when he was talking about coming home and pouring a glass. One of the things we typically like to ask our guests is, okay, what do you typically have? What's your go-to when you get home from work or whatever?
The day drinker, if you will.
The day drinker, I will say I have in my bourbon closet, I have a lot of E.H. Taylor. and I have a lot of Eagle Rare. I really like those. And I'm on and off. I try different things. I like Four Roses. Like I said before, my wife, we're trying to sell our house. And so before we were trying to sell our house, you walked in my front door and there was a bar to the left, and it had 4 decanters. It usually had a brandy or cognac, some type of cognac, Armagnac, in one decanter. And then it had 3 different bourbons, usually one a high proof, at least 120 proof or higher, maybe sometimes 116.
Chase is in. That's what he's looking for.
And then then I have right now, I have 97 Blanton's Gold in one decanter. And I don't want to name
That's
drop
not the
here.
typical
I don't want to name drop here. And then I have an Eagle Rare in another decanter.
I think the next podcast we'll just do on location at Wes's house.
Yeah, well, in my
pull
closet.
the decanter out, and we'll have that area. What made you get into the sommelier thing? Like, was it just a matter of just finished alcohol and taste and whatnot, or what we got here?
I've always been a pretty decent taster. So even when I was 18, my aunt told me I should be a sommelier, and I thought, aren't those waiters? Like, hey, let's pour some. Let's pour a little Pinot Noir.
All right.
Yeah, I know you like the Chablis.
Chablis is excellent.
It is.
It is excellent.
It's really good stuff. That's the guy I was telling you about. Cyril Audouin makes that. That's Marcenay, Le Favier. Really good stuff. North Burgundy, Pinot Noir. Yeah, I'll finish.
Where is this from?
This is from Burgundy. It's a Pinot Noir from Marcenay, from a single vineyard called Le Favier. The guy who makes it is a rugby player and a good friend of mine, Cyril Audouin. You can find his wines for your Tupperlow listeners. They have a lot of his wines at Lavino. You can find some of his wines in Starkville at Restaurant Tyler. Of course, here in Oxford, they have some at Social Wine and Spirits, and then or Social Wine and Whiskey House and High Cotton. And he makes several different red wines, several different white wines, and then a killer rosé, an amazing rosé.
Yeah, all good stores that you mentioned just then. Those are stores I like to pop in Tupelo and Oxford.
So, just kind of like a typical tasting thing, you would see and look at it, and then I can tell you right now from the glass that it's a thin-skinned variety, so I can nail it down to a few grapes just by looking through it. It's pale, so it's kind of clear. You can read the writing through it. Like if I held this bottle up and looked through, you can see the writing through it. And then, on the nose, we kind of give it one or two swirls. If you're sitting there swirling it around, it's just, one, you look like a crazy person, and two, some of those aromas are going to bounce out of the glass. So one or two kind of turns like that, a little swash, get some air in there and get it going. You can get some like red cherry on the nose, a little bit of strawberry, and then you're going to get a little bit of the French call it terroir, but a little bit of that kind of like wet forest, like some like wet leaves maybe. There's a little mushroom in there.
Yeah, I'm picking up all that, Chase. Exactly. Wes is describing this perfectly. It's like he's speaking for me.
There's a little truffle, and then there is some like cool rose petals, right?
See, I think I get a little earthy smell out of that. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And you can go as far as if you want, right? So earthy, that's good. That's a great descriptor. Then you can take it further. Like, what type of earthiness are you getting? Well, I'm getting more of some, kind of like wild mushrooms, maybe even some truffle in there. But there's definitely a funk there. You're correct, Steve.
No.
There's definitely a funk there, but then there's some, like in the background, there's fruit. There's bright red fruit, and then
It's good. I can tell you that.
It's where what sticks to me the most of anything we've talked about today. We just might have smells or memory, because you have to have knowledge of those things to even understand that that's any idea of what you're doing. I mean, because, yeah, if you just smell it and you go, well, that smells like something. Well, if I don't know what the hell it is, then who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. So that's interesting.
Yeah,
I find that really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, on the palate, if you'll notice, it kind of makes your mouth water in the front like that. So that's the acidity. So this is a high acid wine. So right now I can say, hey, this is like most of the fruit we were getting is in the red fruit range. There's a little bit of red currant in here, a cherry, maybe a little strawberry. But most of what we were smelling earlier was earth, terroir, was dirt, was secondary aromas. Then you can say, oh, well, this is an old world wine, meaning it comes from Europe. You can nail it down like that. And then once you taste it, you can taste the acidity. So immediately you know it comes from a colder climate. So colder climates have higher acid in their wines. That's why some French winemakers open up shop in Oregon, because it's a colder climate, kind of most like Burgundy in France. And then, of course, you can, the way you kind of taste alcohol is you take a sip and you let it hit straight to the back of your throat. That's where you're tasting the alcohol. And then the amount of burn it gets, try not to even let it hit your tongue. Just go straight back to the back of your throat. You do that on whiskey too, right? So the amount of alcohol, you're going to feel it if you drink a high proof whiskey, and it's just, your whole chest is burning. That thing's 120, 130, maybe even 140 proof.
Compared to like you're taking a shot of something, you're saying just pour it.
Yeah, just hit it to the back of your throat, and you'll be able to kind of taste it. It does have a little bit of alcohol. There's a little light burn, so you can say, hey, this wine is probably 12.5%, 13%. I don't really know. It's 13% on here. So you can, and there's like a plus or minus 1% there that they,
you won't get docked for being off.
There's a plus or minus 1% even in the bottle, right? Because the alcohol in the wine isn't an exact science for these winemakers. They're using a little system, and they're bouncing something to check the approximate alcohol. So approximately 13. So that's when you can kind of decipher, hey, is this a 12 or is it 13? Is it on the higher end or is it not? Do the same thing with bourbon, right? So this has got a little bit of alcohol in it. It's not bitter at all, right? So there's no tannin in this. There's a little bit, but not much. You feel a little bit on your tongue, a little bit of that, a little bit of, maybe a little hair of it, but it's not much on this Marsanne. So I think this is a really well made wine. And it's fantastic. It's perfect in between bourbons. So
now, did you say this guy's been over to the U.S.?
Yeah, he came and visited me here in Mississippi, and we traveled north Mississippi. It was a quick trip. He was here for one night, and we all went to one of my buddy's house, Mac Nichols, and we grilled steaks, and we drank about 20 bottles of wine, and we broke out some bourbon and had good laughs, good talks. And then the next day, we kind of went around with Cyril. I showed him Mississippi, went to some different liquor stores and did some tastings. And then, the next day, we went up to Memphis, and he was very impressed with the Bass Pro Shops there.
So what do you think of Oxford? What do you think of North Mississippi?
He loved it. He really did. He said, I can't wait to come back and play golf he's a golfer too. So we're going to play golf at Old Waverly next time he comes back. Maybe do a wine dinner there.
If we have time, let me know. We'll have a special bourbon club. And,
for Cyril?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's got an exceptional palate too. Because he does it every day. He can tell, even if a wine is slightly off. He can tell, and bourbon can be off too, right? So you can tell those, you can tell something's highly oxidized and it's unbearable to drink. The same thing happens in wine, Things get too hot from sitting out in the sun. Oxygen gets in. Anytime oxygen gets in, bacteria can get in. Not too much bacteria. I don't have to really worry about that too much in bourbon, but definitely in wine.
Last few minutes here. Let's move on to the charters that we're doing now. The
Charter
101.
101.
Charter 101.
So, and after this, let's go back and then, try this bourbon, let it hit the back of your throat with this 90 proof, and then compare it to this 101, right? And then see how you feel with that alcohol-wise there. That's good.
And there is enough there's a burn, there's a pop a little bit. I mean, it's got a...
Yeah, it's got a pop to it for sure.
And it's got just that little sting in the back of your throat. It's probably a little more on that proof versus a 90 or something like that. Just that little bit of...
Yeah.
Little needle.
So, Wes, when you're sipping for flavors, what's the proper way to do that?
Definitely take your time. Be patient. I would take a small sip of something. Say I was tasting this charter. I'm gonna pour a little bit more. If we're gonna go do this, I'm going to taste this. I'm gonna let a little bit of the bourbon kind of sit around my tongue, and I'm gonna inhale and get oxygen and just kind of move some of those particles around a little bit, get oxygen to it, open it up in my palate, and also at the same time get my body kind of acclimated to the high alcohol, right? So when you're drinking bourbon, you're drinking high alcohol, and you can tell a well-made bourbon from a bad-made bourbon by how smooth it is. If something's just killing you, then it's probably not a good bourbon. With this, and this one has the flavor to back it up too, right? I love this. I'm getting a little of kind of like burnt orange peel in there. There's like a citrusy thing in this.
What he's describing is probably the phenomenon of Steve and I always talk about how the first sip for us, just for the novice, is never how it actually tastes. But when we think, we're just getting acclimated to the alcohol, but as you mentioned, it's just kind of everything. It's just sort of finally getting to you a little bit. You're adjusting and letting it move around and kind of figuring it out. We just don't realize that's actually what's going on, and we're talking about it.
Yeah, and then I like to let just a little bit kind of sit. And like my tongue is burning right now, and then I'm getting a little bit of cinnamon spice to it. There's definitely some good spice to this bourbon. So there's you get your sweetness from the corn, and you get your spice from the rye. So there's probably a good bit of rye in this, and then barley adds a little bit as well. But yeah, this is incredible little bottle here. I opened one of these the other night and used it when I was cooking, and now I'm kind of regretting that. I didn't want to open up a big bottle, and I had one of these sitting.
I'm actually going to pour another sip of that.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. I like the Eagle Rare. It's 90 proof, but to get it to 90 proof, you cut it with water. They cut this with water as well, but there's a little bit more substance in this. Right? So you get a little bit more flavor in higher proofing alcohols. That's why, Colonel Taylor helped come up with the law of bottled and bond, right? So you get 100 proof. Is pretty much the sweet spot. And then I like my bourbons, in the 9 to, 17, 18 year range. You're just getting, I think you're getting a lot more flavor. And that's just because it's been sitting in the barrel for longer, right? So, you put this clear liquid into a barrel, and then you put it in a rick house, and the barrel is it's charred. It's charred new oak. So even a little bit of that caramelization comes in it, and then basically the liquid is going in and out of the barrel. It's expanding and contracting. So you're bringing it in. The wood is you have wood sugars, so sugars in the wood. So you get the sweetness from the corn, but you also get a little wood sweetness, right? That can be like that those vanilla notes. So, it's in, it's out, it's in, it's out, depending on the weather in Kentucky, right? And the summers are hot, the winters are cold, which is perfect. So depending on how severe the summers and winters and how equal they are, disproportionately unequal, depends on how good a bourbon tastes. The sweet spots in the rick house where you put bourbon in and the wood expands and contracts, it gains flavor, it kicks it back out, it gains flavor some more, kicks it back out. It's just a whole process, So when you're looking at wine, you're looking at where it's grown, how it's made. When you're looking at bourbon, you're looking a lot of it has to do with weather, and then where it is in the rick house, how hot, how cold, what were the temperature changes there in the rick house, and can make a good bourbon.
I was listening to a podcast that had Jimmy Russell on it, and there was a whole discussion about that. And Eddie Russell, his son, who has turned me Russell's Reserve single barrels, I absolutely love. And they were talking about the best floors, and it's the middle floors. I forget, I don't remember which they're getting the Wild Turkey 101 from maybe the bottom floors up, but they both said the sweet spots are those middle floors. And I think that's where Eddie gets his Russell's Reserve out of. So yeah, there's just a ton of different factors that come into that.
Yeah, a ton of different factors, in which, just like kind of what got me into wine and spirits is just the story, the history of it all, right? This wine that we're drinking right now from Joseph Druin, one of the I guess patriarchs of the Druin family during World War II. He was in the resistance, and in the Hospice de Beaune, some nuns hid him from the Nazis. So every year now he donates some wine to the Hospice de Beaune, which is a charity, and then he always buys it back, always beating the highest bidder to give the Hospice de Beaune some money, right? Well, he doesn't do it because he's long gone, but his family still carries on that tradition. So I think that's really cool. But then you get some of that stuff in bourbon as well. Like how did bourbon come about? Maybe Elijah Craig did it. Maybe it was, so there's definitely different stories about how bourbon came to be, which is very, very interesting. The same goes for wine.
We appreciate the time. I know we're going to have you back for some round tables, pick your brain more as the weeks goes on. But for the first one, appreciate being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoyed it, Wes. Thanks, bud.
Yeah, absolutely.